Hello, everybody. Today is Tuesday, April 4th, 2023, and this is the OLM Dev and Issue Triage meeting. We have a ton of topics for today, so we're going to jump right into it. The very first few topics were all contributed by myself. The first topic is a call to action for the community. We don't have a mission statement, and we probably need one. It would be great to have a very concise description that captures our mission statement, and then we'll be able to use that as a rallying cry for all that we do. I created a GitHub issue. So if we look at this, we'll see that it is issue 94 in the community repository. I will be taking that and bringing it up at tomorrow's steering committee meeting, I believe we have scheduled. So get excited for that. I've created a HackMD document so that we can collaborate on it rather than just creating endless number of comments. Okay. Any comments on this one before we go to the next item? 3, 2, 1. Okay, cool. So next thing I wanted to bring up is we don't have so we had this upstream meeting and we had this whole idea of using GitHub projects to track ongoing feature development work. And we're developing a product that, the landing page is really operator controller, but then there's a number of other projects that you need to use, such as DEPI for dependency resolution. And then there's, reliance on the catalog source V1 API. And on top of that, there's also a reliance on RuckBack. And so it can be a bit disjointing when you're trying to get involved in our community. So I wanted to create a contributing PR that's going to streamline the process for people that come to the operator controller repository and want to get involved. So there's some comments. Things I'd just like to call out is that we make sure that we have all our, we shout out for all of our communication methods. We kind of give a high-level contribution workflow description. We spell out that small contributions, are a bit more ad hoc. So if this is a doc change or just a small bug fix, as long as it has code and testing, I think we're pretty good just accepting them if it's a small enough change. Just make sure, one requirement is that, you create a GitHub issue, you break the commits down into logical units, include tests, and sign each commit. And then when we have larger scale contributions that are going to require, either a pretty big shift in how the project works, or it's going to require efforts from multiple people, we have spelt that out that, hey, create an issue, make sure that there's like a design doc, bring it up in the community meetings, spam it on the Slack channel or the Google group channel, and it just kind of discusses how you go through that. None of this is set in stone. In fact, I would like people that currently don't contribute a ton to the project to look at this document and say, hey, does this make it easier for me to contribute if I wanted to? Or more importantly, is there anything that we could add to this document that would make it easier for you to contribute to the project? Any comments on this one? So Varsha had one note. Ankita. There was like, for our projects, do we want to require contributors to agree to CNCF contributor license agreement? I didn't have the answer for that, so I was just going to run that past the group. So we could have that discussion here, or we could follow up and create a GitHub issue against our projects. But does anybody have anything they want to bring up in this space?
Nope.
Okay. So cool. So please make sure to contribute to the PR and help us shape our contributor experience. Regarding Ankita's question about do we want to force people to agree to this CNCF contributor license? Do people know, do other upstream projects do this that aren't like part of core Kubernetes? Is there a benefit? What are the benefits we're getting? Does anyone know anything in that space? What would get out of forcing this on our community?
So OpenSSL does have a contributor license agreement, but they also have a corporate license, corporate contributor agreement as well. I'm not sure what it gets them. The project itself is now Apache 2.0, so I'm not sure of the reason, but I guess it's to make sure that you are effectively signing off on the code, and you have the right to submit the code that you are submitting. Basically, that's, I think, what you're acknowledging, that you have the right to submit the code that you're submitting.
Yeah, and I think we actually get that by the DCO that we have in our project. I think that was like the whole point. There's I forget where this is, but I had this link earlier.
You've already added that in the contributor doc as part of like the steps for committing the PR. So maybe we might want to call that out in a separate section, that DCO is something you're agreeing to when you're signing your commits, but I don't know if that's strictly necessary.
Sorry, when you say, you mean from the DCO? Oh, here's the link. You're talking about this bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the DCO, and this is basically someone saying they have the right to contribute code. Do we need to do anything beyond this DCO?
I wasn't sure if the CNCF contributor license agreement was something that's required of CNCF projects, so that's why.
Okay, so Varsha, since you brought this up, would you mind running this all the way home and seeing like what other projects are doing, what the benefits are, and whether or not we even need to do this? My gut is that we probably don't need to, but I just don't know enough about it to really have a strong opinion.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, cool. Next one. So we don't have a code owners file in our repository, and as I was, good point. Maybe Ankita, maybe we should bring this up at the steering committee meeting. Whether or not we want to have people use the CNCF contributor license or have to agree to it to contribute to our project. So let's maybe first step is bring this. Going to bring this up at the next scheduled steering committee meeting. Okay.
And that's tomorrow, so that should be quick.
Yeah, we should have a response quickly. Cool. Next up, code owners. So as I was writing the contributor doc, some people had asked for like some insights into like, should we set X, or some people had suggested that we specify what our response time would be. And I pretty much said, I kind of started steering it towards like, hey, within a week, one of the owners will get back to you. And then I was like, wait a minute. We don't actually have a code owners file in the operator controller repo, which is kind of interesting. And so I created a PR to add a code owners doc. And for the most part, by default, it's just going to automatically request that one of us review the code. You have to have like pretty strong permissions to even be in this group. So I need to look at, make sure, so they call it out, if you look at the code owner docs in the PR, that you need like admin or owner. Oh, set up a code owner stuff. Choose this code. Yeah, so you have to have write permissions for the repository to be a part of this group. I was a little concerned about how many people have write permissions for the repository. So I ended up doing the next ticket, which was just stating, updating the operator controller repo settings to make sure that nobody's allowed to bypass any of the security settings that we have on the repo. So some of those are like, don't, prevent pushes to master, or sorry, to main. So this was kind of a twofer. The first one was, let's introduce code owners so that people know who to talk to if they want to get something merged, and automatically notify people to review PRs as they come up. And then there was a follow-up. I guess this could kind of go in the one below it, where I was like, oh, how many people have write permissions right now? And then if we have write permissions, what are we doing to protect our main branch? And I noticed that we hadn't had this setting approved, so I just went ahead and enabled this so that people can't push to master or to main. And then there was another option to require sign off from a code owner before merging a PR. And so this was, there's like a two-part question. One, are people open to the idea of a code owner's file? And what that would look like is, go on the PR, comment whether or not it sounds like a good idea. Next question would be, who should all have those permissions? I said it, Pear was already on the group, or was the only member of the group. I just added myself and Joe, because we've been spearheading most of the development efforts in the operator controller repository. And I just thought that made sense. I'm open to adding more people, but before we add more people, I just wanted to make sure that we have our security settings so that, with the requirement that you have to have write permissions to the repository, I wanted to make sure that we're bulletproof and we're not about to accidentally overwrite the main branch at any point. So I wanted to have the first initial set of code owners review the repo settings to make sure that as we open this up to more people, we don't accidentally shoot ourselves in the foot. Any major concerns that we want to bring up now that can't be driven by commenting on the PR?
Maybe so how are you doing this? Because we've probably had this conversation async, but I don't think we've reached any conclusion. How are you making sure of the last point? So I mean, there's no tide or prow that sort of understands the LGTM approved sort of things like that. What is the effect of adding people to the code owners? Can they go and I'm guessing that once you add the code owner and you do that, do not allow bypassing of the above setting, that means that nobody will see the merge button because nobody has direct write access, right? So what is the
so this is slightly different. There are protections that require a PR go up before something gets merged, right? But that alone doesn't prevent me from force pushing to the main branch if I have elevated enough privileges. And enabling this means that I no longer have the ability to force push. So that's one of the questions you had, right? So it's a GitHub setting. And regarding this one, we don't need Prow or anything. It's a feature built into GitHub. So it's a checkbox that it's literally, I think this is the text, and it's a checkbox. So what it would change is that the merge option wouldn't be available until code owners you give a /approve or the approve button in GitHub. I don't know which one it is, but you'd have to approve it. And that coupled with the code owners, along with not allowing us to bypass settings, basically means that nobody gets to push directly to the thing, and that it always needs to be approved by some code owner before something goes in.
Okay, cool.
And hopefully we can lock down permissions even for code owners to agree that we can open this list of code owners beyond just the three of us, because that's an artificial blocker that I just haven't gone and expanded to the rest of the team, because I wanted somebody who's actually set up repos before to be secure to sign off on the settings I set.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we've had this conversation for our repos where we wanted this kind of approval, and we wanted at least 2 code owners to approve before a PR can go in. But it looks like this one at least gets us 1 code owner has to approve before before a PR can go in.
I think you can even set there be like you can bump the number of code owners that need to approve before merging.
Okay, cool.
So I'll confirm that after. I'll confirm that in the background and I'll update it right here. Okay, after I finish introducing like my 20 bullet points.
Sounds good, Alex. Thank you.
Perfect. And then there's probably a follow-up where we need to actually add a process for people being added to this list of code owners, so it's spelled out. Yes, Joe?
So we have in the community sort of CNCF guidelines, like the contributor ladder. Did you account for that at all with this?
Not the initial one. I was thinking we might use that to define what our process is for becoming a approver / maintainer.
Okay.
So maybe we call that up.
Yeah, I think we need to get to that. And if code owners supports that, great. Or if we need to modify, if we need to make like a amendment to support what we want to do, like either way, I think we need to drive towards the alignment. I think the ideal world is basically no one has a right, and we use upstream CNCF prow / tide, and we do it the same way that the rest of Kubernetes does it. But I think that'll take some work. So if we need something sort of as a stopgap in the meantime, great, that sounds good.
Okay, so let me just call that out then. So I'm going to say this may be a stopgap until we can better align with the operator frameworks. Contributor ladder doc. How's that sound?
Yeah, that's good.
And so I'll add if we can't align with a code owner's doc, we'll create an issue to use CNCF's route. Okay, how does that sound? Okay, and the last one I had was somebody brought up that when they joined the OLM development Google group, they didn't get automatically invited to all our meetings. And so now we have a OLM development community calendar. So you can look at that. Whenever we add a meeting to it, you'll automatically get invited to it. If you join after a meeting invite has been sent out, and then you add this calendar to your Google Calendar. After the invite has already been set out, you'll actually see these historical meetings that we've set up in advance that are recurring. So this should ease that. This should make it easier for contributors to understand what meetings are scheduled upstream going forward.
So
Okay.
do all of us have access to add meetings to that calendar? And
Right now, yeah, I can disable that, but I just set it up so that anyone can do it.
Okay.
Maybe I can add the Google group, and maybe then only people from the Google group can add it. Events is at least like a slightly more secure way, and we just curate them as they come in. So all that is follow up. See if we can limit permissions to add events to upper on dev Google group members. That would be a good follow-up. How's that look? Okay. And that's most of the stuff. I have one other one, but I'm not going to bump this in front of anyone. So I'm going to hand it off to Ankita and Barsha to showcase their demo on the operator controller integration with the new catalog source. API. So I'll stop sharing. Ankita, Varsha?
I can share my screen. Is my screen visible?
It is, but the texts are very small.
So the demo is going to be pretty quick. Is this fine?
Yeah, sure.
So the demo is going to be pretty quick because I have the environment ready. But before getting into the demo, I would like to give a brief overview on where we started and where we are now. So not so long ago, we had milestone 1 of OLM v1, where we actually created hard-coded entities to provide it to DEPI, and the operator controller deployed a particular operator on cluster. So for anyone who tried out milestone 1, all they could do is deploy only the Prometheus operator. Now, the next iteration which we had, and Ankita gave a demo on this last week, was we went a step further and we used the registry v1 clients and the catalog source v0 design. And we provided input to the DEPI. So basically, this gave a bit of leverage to the operator author. They could install any operator which is present, which follow the catalog source v0 design. Now, the third iteration, which we have right now, is based on a POC of catalog source v1 beta 1 API, which Anik and Bryce had been working on. So this particular demo installs, has already the catalog source v1 a design, like a project installed on cluster. And what we did is we just tested out based on the current design, does the operator controller work as expected? In the sense, this was a POC to list out the difficulties which we faced, the improvements which we had compared to catalog source v0 design in terms of integrating the newer API version of catalog source v1 beta 1 with operator controller. So to save us some time, I already have the catalog source v1 beta 1 installed, API is present and installed. This, how to do this was given by a quick demo by Anik last time, so I'm not going to repeat that. We have all the packages available and we have the bundle data available on cluster. Now, what I'm going to do is quickly run the operator controller and just test out Argo CD operator, just test out if the Argo CD operator gets deployed or not. And I just applied the sample operator API. Let me show you what the sample operator API is. The sample operator object has Argo CD operator as the package name defined. And we have the reconciler running. It's just an object modified error. So once we apply the particular operator CR, we have the Argo CD resources available on cluster. And once I delete this, we delete the operator out of the cluster. So this is what we worked on. We do have a work in progress PR ready, which would be done by end of this week. And we also have a document running, where we have documented what are the assumptions we made based on catalog source v1 design, which is present currently, and what are the inputs we have on the DEPI side, like how we probably need to enable the DEPI resolver to accept multiple entity sources or multiple variable sources and stuff like that. So the document is not ready yet, so I'm not bringing it up for discussion here, but we are definitely working on it, and we should be ready with it by end of this week to have inputs on both the ends, DEPI side and also on the operator, the catalog source v1 side. So yeah, this was a quick demo on the work which Ankita and I did during the last week.
So Varsha, one question. Can we see on the right terminal, can we see the bundles that are available for Argo CD? And then when you install the operator CR, which bundle is it exactly installing? Because I noticed that in the package, you just mentioned the package, which is Argo CD.
Mm-hmm.
So what is DEPI considering
It should just be installing the latest bundle,
Latest as in the Semver wise?
semi-wise. It sorts by the bundles, I mean, the bundle versions and the channels. So, if I remember correctly, Argo CD only had one channel in its package, so it should just be installing the latest.
Okay. So DEPI is wired to do the resolution that when
Yeah.
you create the entity, here are my channels and here are the bundles within the channels. So DEPI is saying that, okay, from the default channel, I'll take the latest, the head of the channel, and I'll install that.
It looks for all the constraints, and out of every option that it can choose that matches a single constraint, it'll try to pick the latest one.
Okay.
If there's more than one to choose from.
So now that means that I can install any package that you've shown from there, from the list of packages. But then it won't install the dependencies of those packages, right?
At present, it will not install the dependencies for packages.
Okay, but I can install any of the packages that we can see in the list of packages. Right.
There is a version range field. I have not quite tested it to see how DEPI reacts to it.
Okay, I mean, my question was more because I was curious why you guys chose Argo CD instead of any other operator. Is it just a random choice or?
It was more or less random.
Yeah, it was a random plus we so we didn't test out having dependencies installed. So we just took out the first operator name, which didn't have any dependencies.
Okay, okay, sounds good. Looks cool.
Yep. So that was a quick demo on the operator v1 side. Yeah, I had a few hands raised.
Yeah, Varsha, great demo, thank you. Can you actually specify the identity of the catalog that you want to install the package from?
Right now, in the operator API, we can't. It's just looking at one catalog source which is available and then installing the operator. But right now, the design considers that there is like the package, there's no duplication of package in the catalog source. So for example, Argo CD package is available, can be available only in one catalog source.
So
We
I think
have a cluster level, the packages and bundle metadata are both cluster level objects. So because of like name uniqueness, we sort of have that implicit requirement of if you try to install a specific bundle, it will have to come from catalog. But I see what you mean. One thing to call out is that the current implementation of bundle metadata does expose the catalog source that each bundle is from. So this possibly could be added. I'm not sure if that's the direction that we want to go in, though.
yeah,
I
we've
would
talked.
take a look at what some people are doing today, right? They might actually load another catalog on the cluster that has preview versions of a thing that you have already installed, or it has hotfix versions of a thing that you have already installed. And that means you will have two catalogs that at least have the same, provide the same package name, but different versions. So I almost feel like we need to be able to reconcile this, right? Otherwise, a hotfix workflow or an update test workflow would just not be possible.
Yeah, Daniel, so these are all on the roadmap. I think we've talked very briefly about the implementation details. Keeping in mind the package uniqueness, I mean, we're already seeing a lot of those problems in V0 package server, right? So we are toying with some of the ideas. I think we talked briefly last week about an idea that says, okay, we'll just add labels that to all of the resources that you saw that'll have the catalog name so that you can select resources based on label selectors that says, okay, I want only these resources from these catalogs. But what you just saw is just the first pass implementation. We've added one catalog and we've installed. This is just to get us going. But what do you
Yeah,
just,
yeah, that makes sense. I was just curious if you already have that, if you see that on the horizon, and it seems like you do, so that's great.
Question I had, not exactly tied to the catalogs, but I noticed when you uninstalled the thing, it removed the CRD, which obviously is not how V0 works today. And I was curious what the roadmap is for that. Would that be contingent on there are no CRs, so it removes the CRD, or is the intent that, yep, we're always going to blow the CRD away and all the CRs, or what the future of that looks like?
So uninstall strategy, from what I understand, maybe Anik and Joe can correct me wrong, is still in the roadmap. We aren't sure of how we would like to handle the uninstall strategy. Like what happens when the CRT is uninstalled? Do we have garbage collection in place to remove all the CRs, or how do we like to go ahead with removing dependent CRs and things like that? But that is my understanding. Probably Joe and Anik can elaborate on that. But as you said, Ben, we haven't tested out the exact uninstall strategy where we have an operator CR installed and then we remove things out, and what happens in that case.
Yeah, I think the path we're going down right now is if basically like there's going to be one operator CR per bundle deployment period. And you have, and nothing is going to create an operator CR except for a client. So like we won't create them ourselves under the hood like we do with subscriptions today. And so what that means is like if a client says like I no longer want this operator, then it's going to delete the bundle deployment, and RuckPack doesn't really have any special sauce when it comes to what gets deleted or what doesn't. It just says like, okay, everything that was in that bundle is gone now. So we're sort of dealing with this at the operator API level, not the RuckPack level. And this is the stuff that Todd is working on at the same time. So I think there's still more work and experimentation to do here.
And you said there'd be a CR per operator. Is that a requirement?
That's not a requirement, right? Like this gets into the whole discussion about do we auto install dependencies or not? Like it all comes down to the uninstalled question. So ideally, we would just be able to install dependencies everywhere automatically, go down the transitive dependency tree and install everything for you based on what you actually said you care about. The problem is that it doesn't seem like there's an easy way then to safely uninstall those same transitive dependencies because you can't be sure that some other client on the cluster didn't go and run kubectl API resources and discover that there's some transitive dependency that they really like and start using it directly. So I think we have to still figure out how we want to deal with that. And the way that we're dealing with that, at least now, is we won't ever install a bundle deployment unless someone explicitly says that they want it. So basically no auto dependency installations right now. I don't think that's necessarily always going to be the answer forever, but that's sort of the simple answer, for now.
so if I were to guess, I think where Ben is coming from is the fact that today there are operators that say that we say that, okay, the operators are just supposed to be reconciling CRs. And if you delete and recreate the operator, that's a harmless operation. But then today there are operators who said that no, we cannot be deleted, or our CRDs cannot be, because we've got workloads. And if you delete the CRDs, all of that is gone from the cluster. So if you uninstall, when we delete the operator CR, it deletes the bundle deployment and all of the CRD and everything that's in the bundle is gone. Then that makes it hard for those operators to get onboarded to V1. Is that where you're coming from, Ben, for the uninstall question?
Honestly, I mean, yes, but honestly, I just wanted to understand what the plan was and to make sure that we're thinking about it and talking about it, and haven't made an assumption just yet about how that's going to behave. So.
Yeah, I think that's what Joe was trying to say. I think the right now where we are is we'll just uninstall everything that is within the bundle. But then when we get to that stage, if we see that, okay, it does sound like a huge operation for those operators to change. Maybe that's a larger discussion that's yet to be done later. Is
Yeah,
what
so, I
I'm
mean,
told.
the path we ended up picking in V0 was initially we didn't delete them at all. And then we sort of later said, well, we'll add a way to delete them. And I kind of feel like that was probably the right answer. So I could see us ending up in a similar path on V1 where I know we're treating the resources of the bundle more generically, but whether we would potentially special case CRDs and say, okay, when we're uninstalling this bundle, we're going to delete all the resources this bundle defined except the CRDs. And for the CRDs, maybe that's a user input controlled thing where we decide whether or not the CRDs get left around. But
Yeah,
again, just want to make sure that that's still to be discussed. It doesn't have to be discussed here, but
yeah.
So
And it's just going to be, I think, the other way around. In V0, we said that, okay, for these couple of operators who don't want their workloads to be uninstalled, we'll tell the entire world to uninstall manually. Whereas in V1, I think I can see us saying that by default, everything gets installed, but then here's a special case that you can make sure that your workload is not uninstalled when your operator CR is uninstalled. But yeah, it's a larger discussion for later on.
I think we would want to do that above the RuckPack layer, though. Like, it would be great if RuckPack could just always just blindly do it. And then if we said, oh, we don't want to uninstall those bundle deployments, then we would orphan them at the operator level. But yeah, I agree with them. Like, we don't have to discuss this here. This is definitely an active area of conversation. And it's definitely, the book is not closed on this for sure.
okay, cool. So one quick thing I wanted to bring up. So I think that demo was really, really cool. It's awesome to see how quickly this is moving along since the project was submitted last week. I think one thing I just want to call out is that we've been using the OLMV1 project, GitHub project, in order to create a top level view for people coming into the project to see what's going on, and then basically communicate like what's going on. And this is like our main focus for the upcoming sprints, if you want to get, or the upcoming couple of cycles, next couple of weeks, so that you can get involved. I think the catalog stuff is moving very quickly, which is great, but I'm concerned that we don't have like a good way to capture all the work that's going on there. And we've talked about, earlier this meeting, we have a doc up for how we're trying to help, how we're trying to define what the contribution process is. And it would be great if all the projects that make up OLMV1 follow the same contribution workflow, right? So that we normalize how ongoing work is discovered. And so what I would ask everybody to do who's contributing to any of these projects is look at the contributing MD and provide feedback so that we land on a process that everybody buys into. Because I do not want it to be difficult for us to understand all the work that's going on. And I also don't want to force people into a process that we created in the early OLMV1 stages if they think it's going to inhibit their ability to work quickly. And so if we can all get together and define a process that will not create a ton of overhead, will provide users an easy way to discover all the work that we're doing, I think that would be a really, really great thing to do, and possibly even prioritize over any more feature development, simply because I think we gain a lot by defining this process early and adopting it, as a core practice.
Hey,
Okay.
Alex, on that topic, I guess maybe this is part of it, but as someone that's trying to come up to speed here, I mean, we've got like these, all these different components and kind of how they all fit together and what kind of, RuckPack, the controller, catalog D, DEPI. I mean, how these things all kind of fit together. I think you're trying to drive it. Can there be some consistency there? But is there a way for a newbie to see kind of like how these things fit together, or, you know, what I would need to do to be able to start to kind of duplicate the POCs and things that you're running here, you know, to come up to speed?
Yes, so one of milestone two's primary focuses was just making it very easy to install a release of, you know, the operator controller, which effectively mirrors what OLMV1 is, right? And so Daniel Franz has been leading the efforts in milestone 2, which focus on distributing and make it easy to cut a release and then install a release. So if you go to the operator controller repository and look at the releases section, there's a script that you can run that's going to install all the related projects. And so that will get everything that you need installed and allow you to like play around with the individual components. But to answer your other question, which focuses on like, how do you find all the subcomponents when they're across multiple projects? That was a concern that one member of our community brought up last week, actually. And, you know, the suggestion was like, maybe we should update the README to cross compile all the different components, right? Because Deppy could be used on its own. So it may not make perfect sense to link to the operator controller in some ways, but right now we're the only user, so it might make sense. That's something we could discuss. I do think like having some basic architecture docs that kind of outline, you know, the handoff between all these components would be beneficial. It's just that we're finally just getting to a point where these workflows, you know, exist, right? Because there was no operator API just a couple of weeks ago, and so there was no way to architect a, you know, show a architect design based on something that doesn't exist. Especially with our model where we're trying to take on, you know, the smallest incremental changes that make a feature that we can make to get the feature in front of people, get community feedback, and understand if we need to pivot slightly. But now that we have a way to cut a release and we have these components working together, I think it, you know, creating some design docs and updating the README so that, you know, these repos, it's a bit more intuitive, like what repos you have to discover in order to work on a component. I think that could make a lot of sense. And
one thing that I would add is that the best way I think to like get involved is probably just to, you know, go to the operator controller. That's the root repo right now for OLMV1, and run make run, and that'll literally install the entire thing for you. Pull in the dependencies. It pulls in Ruckpack and the other things from releases. So if you're trying to hack on those, then, you know, that might be a little bit more difficult. But other than that, none of this stuff is like super well written down. And I would say like, yeah, it'd be good if we could go and put some of those things that Alex is talking about together. But at the end of the day, the more people we have hacking on this and the more people we have talking about it in the OLM dev channel, you know, the more we'll be able to grow that mind share. So I think my answer would be, if you're interested in an area and you're not sure how to get started, rather than like have someone go and write this big architecture diagram, just go into the OLM dev channel and start asking questions and start, you know, figuring out what's going on. And then that'll hopefully then prompt us to go and pay more attention to some of those areas that don't have those docs if we keep getting questions about the same thing over and over and over again. I feel like part of the thing that we need to solve for is like, let's just try to move as quickly as we can and not put too much overhead on any of this. And just keep that discussion moving forward in the open. Like, that's how we make this more upstream friendly.
That sounds good, Joe. I just was, you know, I wasn't kind of saying we need heavy documentation, but
Yeah,
how to get started, you know, when you know, you're multitasking, doing a bunch of things. So I think make run from that project gets you in the game. So
exactly. Yeah, and if you have problems with that, then ask us in the Slack channel. And
okay,
I would say like the Slack channel is the best place because issues sometimes get buried. Like we're all in the Slack channel, and that's where I think we want to drive more of the conversation. And if we can get more of that discussion happening there, then that makes the, you know, the PRs and the issues and the repo more effective, because then we can start talking about them and centralizing things. So yeah, make run in the various repos, and then Slack channel.
Okay, and so Joe H, actually, I guess I gotta specify that. You had oh, sorry, actually, both Joes had something on it, and I think Joe Lamford is actually up next. So do we want to kick?
I will go, I can do this in 2 minutes.
Okay, let's do it.
I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so I presented this yesterday at the SDK working group, and I just want to talk about it here too. So in the agenda doc, there's a link to an enhancement proposal. It's not really an enhancement, but it's just a place that we can try to get some consensus. I've been playing around with this thing called task file, which is an alternate to make-file, which has a much simpler syntax and gives us sort of the same exact behavior that we have now, but is, in my opinion, easier to maintain, and has all the attributes that we seem to care about. So I won't spend a ton of time here. You can go and read the stuff that's linked in the agenda and get a taste for what it looks like. But essentially, like, what I'm proposing is, instead of make run, we have task run. And it does the same thing essentially, but if you go and look at the task file, it's a YAML file. It has like a very, very straightforward syntax. You just say, like, here's the name of the task, here's the commands I want to run. There's variable and environment variable substitution. There's dynamic variables that you can like shell out and, you know, pull stuff in. You can run other tasks as part of, you know, there's like subtasks essentially. There's internal versus external tasks. So if you have a bunch of like shared code that you want a bunch of your exposed tasks to use, you can actually define a task for that, but not actually have it show up on the command line when you run make. So like you can see here, these are the ones that are actually available to me to run. It looks a lot like the same thing we do in our make file, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that you just can't see, right? So like there's this tools one that going down pulls in the right tool versions, but you don't see that here. It just, those things just happen. Like when we want to run build generate, there's a dependency on the build generate task that says go and make sure I've got controller gen. And then the last thing I'll say before I turn it back over is there's a summary, which is pretty nice. So you can do like build summary, and it'll tell you, like, there's a long doc that you can read about, and it tells you what the dependencies are, it tells you what happens. So in my mind, like, this gives us exactly kind of what we want in a much easier to maintain way. I don't know about everybody else, but Makefile to me is like, I can do the simple things easily, and as soon as I need to do something that's slightly more difficult, the syntax gets in my way and makes me less productive. So anyway, I've got that enhancement issue. It's linked. Go read about it. I want to build a consensus around this. So I think we should make operator framework projects use this instead of Makefile. But I would rather we be consistent than for some repos to use it and some not. So that's why I put this in the enhancements repo for us to drive consensus on. So that's my spiel, and we can turn it back over to the next topic.
Cool. Is there a medium that you want to drive that conversation / vote?
The enhancement issue that's linked in the agenda has the description of everything, and I just ask people in that issue to thumbs up or thumbs down, and then we can talk about there too if people want to comment or have suggestions or whatever.
Okay. Okay. On that note, I'm going to hand it off to Joe H.
Thank you. So that enhancement repo might be what I'm looking for, but Chris Johnson my colleague is on vacation and he wanted me to just kind of touch base with the group here. I think there's been some dialogue in the Slack channel about a workflow where licensing, software license accept kinds of things are discussed and kind of rolled into OLM V1. And I think he was just kind of looking for what's the right place to write up an RFE or start that kind of discussion. So I guess I'm really just looking for maybe it is the enhancement repo, or there's some place where we can submit our RFEs or start that sort of dialogue. So that's what I'm looking for.
Is this the thread about if an operator has a license requirement and we want the operator or the cluster admin to acknowledge and accept the license?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. I think the best place for that is probably in the catalog D repo. Because that's where the catalog stuff is, and this will likely be something that goes in the catalog. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on where to put it, but that seems like the obvious place. The other thing could be in the enhancements repo. If we somehow want to tie it to the overall larger OLM V1 effort, if we think it's going to cross boundaries of projects.
I mean, we've been doing a lot of writing for these things in HackMD. The OLM team, I don't know if that is accessible to the entire group. But I'm guessing that that's where Joe H is coming from. You guys want to write up something that describes the entire thing? Because I know there's a Slack thread, but then Slack threads can get sometimes out of hand, and it's not really easy to go and reread the conversations to get a coherent sort of understanding of what was actually being discussed. If you're looking for what is the sort of the channel for communicating RFEs or even proposals, I think we are just doing ad hoc HackMDs. If you're
I get that. I guess I'm just, we can put that, Chris can write up a doc as a HackMD doc. I think he's done that in the past, but then, just so that we don't lose that as an RFE or it's linked into some kind of a process where we don't lose
so
it.
to comment on this, if people will take a look at the contributing PR that I threw up, and I'm proposing that we expand to most of the projects so that we have a uniform process for contributing feature requests and ideas. It calls out like GitHub issues need to be the point of discoverability for ongoing work. They can link to HackMDs like Anik had mentioned. And then we just need I don't think we do a good job in the contributing doc right now to label it so that it's put under, we don't have that process fully fleshed out in terms of how we're going to label it so that it comes up for discussion in terms of how we're going to, review and make sure that the large feature request is discussed and, put into a milestone. So again, the process we're using for OLM V1 right now doesn't have to be the process that we use, but I want to drive our conversation on how we'd like to contribute these ideas through that PR and then span and then take that contributing doc and make sure that all the other projects in our little ecosystem follow the same process. Okay.
Yeah, we need to distinguish between here's a design for a feature that we all agree we need, and here is a proposal for a feature. Like, I think what we're talking about here is the latter, which is like, this is the thing we need to do. We don't know how we're going to do it yet. So HackMD is probably not appropriate at this point. I guess what I would say, Joe and Alex, I don't know if we have this captured anywhere in terms of the contributing docs, but it seems like what makes sense here is an enhancements issue in the enhancements repo that says like, hey, we think OLM V1 should have this feature. And then that's where we discuss and figure out, what are the contours of that feature. And once there's an agreement that that's going to be part of OLMV1, then we put it in the PRD. And then the PRD is essentially the gold standard for here's what's going to be a feature that's implemented. And the good part about that is that like we consider that in the grand scheme of everything else that needs to be implemented at the same time. I think what we want to avoid, which happened with OLMV0, is, hey, here's a new feature we want. Okay, let's go implement that in isolation. Oh crap, we didn't consider that feature in the context of these other features that we're also doing. So now it's like this weird, crappy UX.
Yeah, that sounds good.
One comment that is actually, against using issues as the place for proposing the ideas. Like, I'm imagining that, okay, so Joe has to go off and create this issue against, whatever project it makes sense to make it against. And then, all he wants to do is like say, hey, we need this thing. And the thing we're going to need is enough acceptance criteria, right? Or something that fully paint the picture of what it is they're trying to do. And so if we want to do that, that means he's going to write that up in the very first initial comment. And now, whenever he wants to modify what that, the requirements are, or if we want to modify what it is, we have to go and edit that top level one or read over the entire issue to understand what the final state of the thing is, right? Because people could do one-off comments on the issue that say, hey, we should also have this feature requirement. And so then somebody has to go and update the actual initial thing that captures everything. And so I'm concerned if we don't use a living document to capture some of these requirements and stuff, all we're going to have are these bloated issues that don't directly communicate what it is we're trying to land on, unless somebody goes through the work of capturing it all at the end. And even after they capture it, they might need to revisit this when somebody adds new criteria. And so I feel like a living document that says, hey, this is the current thing that we're proposing is totally valid and probably the preferred way of communicating or tracking changes to a requested feature. And then updating that document and fully fleshing out the design specs once it gets accepted and,
Yeah, so Alex, I'm not opposed to that. I think what I would say is like, let's not try to get too particular right now and just say like the entry point is the enhancements repo. And if you make an issue or you make a PR, we'll look at it. And if it seems like you need an active living document, then, we'll figure it out sort of on the fly. But in my mind, I think if we try to say like, here's the exact process all the time, like that, it just gets too hard and we're always going to iterate and it's always going to be changing. And so in my mind, the important part is like, here's where we're going to look and here's where we're going to talk about stuff. And if we're not talking about it, then you should ping us in the Slack channel. And eventually, if we agree on it, then we'll close it and put it in the PRD.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think like an easy, like there's like ways to template issues. And if we could like say like feature request or something, I don't know what or proposal. And then automatically, if, when you go to create an issue, that's like a default issue creation option, and then it's automatically labeled, like get the hard stuff or like the operator framework specific nomenclatures out of the way of people, like streamlining how to submit a feature. I think that would be a very good, user experience for people trying to submit these ideas. And then we can always follow up and, like you said, ask for this to be like, hey, we think it's a good idea, but we need more details. We moved the design stuff to this HackMD and we're good to go forward in case where it's needed. But again, I just want to make sure this is documented on, like I want this to be discussed, not here or anywhere else. I want it discussed on the contributing PR. So we, like, that is the source of truth for what this process looks like.
So we've discussed this process a lot, but I don't know if we've actually answered Joe H's question. So that means we're all in agreement that for the topic that Joe wants to talk about, we can have an issue in the enhancement repo and then take it from there.
Yeah, and Joe, if you could just add it to the like obviously we're kind of ironing out what the contribution workflow is for suggesting features and everything. So if you could just add it to next week's agenda, so we can make sure that that issue is looked at.
Yeah, sure. And I can look at the the contributing PR kind of thing. And I'm not one for super documented processes, but I think we'll sort through this. And so
In my
start with the
mind,
enhancement repo and see what happens.
yeah, so in my mind, yeah, it'd be great to have those contributor docs written so that people know where to go. But if we don't actually back that up with looking and discussing and putting putting our opinions in the right places on a consistent basis, then that contributing doc becomes useless because the enhancement repo becomes a graveyard of stuff that people have proposed that has no discussion on it. So I think like with any of this, we've got to walk the talk and make sure that what we say is the thing to do, we actually pay attention to. So we have to formalize that stuff.
Totally agree.
Agreed. Okay, I think I have what I need to get started. I appreciate the discussion, and I'm sure we'll work through the process as we go forward. So thank you.
Cool. Sorry, I was just typing a message. So if anybody's curious where the PRD is, it's in a Google Doc. You can see it in the OLM-v1 GitHub project. I've also got a README PR update that adds it to the operator controller README. So if you want to take a look at that, that should merge after we're done the contributing doc, because it kind of mentions the contributing doc, but it doesn't. The contributing doc wasn't merged yet. So again, just everybody jump on that, and we'll be able to decide what the process is for people like Joe H who want to contribute. So on that note, does anyone have any last minute additions they want to call out? I had one item, we're over, so I'm going to move it to next week, but I did look into some of the CNCF marketing promotional services that they offer. There were a whole bunch of other services. So if you're interested in looking at that, you can look at next week meeting notes to learn more about that. But there's some really cool stuff. Like they allow you to do surveys, and we could query the CNCF community in terms of how they install and upgrade CRDs now. And they have security, legal assistance, community management, and design and aesthetics like logos and websites. So if you could be useful to look into it, but I'm going to let everybody go. Thank you for joining on this meeting, and I will see you all next week.
Thanks, Alex.